This is one of the biggest mistakes students make: DNA versus genes.
Okay, imagine for a second that you're facing a massive biological storage problem. You've got this incredibly long, ridiculously complex string of instructional code. It's literally a blueprint containing every single detail required to build and run a human body. Now imagine having to neatly pack all of that information into a microscopic space, the nucleus of a single cell, without a single piece getting tangled or lost. Honestly, how does nature pull off this architectural miracle? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely decode the alphabet of inheritance. By the time we wrap up, you'll have total mastery over the fundamental units that make you exactly who you are. Let's get into it. To get there, we've got a really clear, structured roadmap for today's explainer. We are going to start with the blueprint of life, then we'll move into the genomic spool. After that, we'll hit genes and physical traits, explore alleles, different genetic flavors, and finally, we'll lock it all in and master the exam question.
Section 1. The blueprint of life, the foundation of heredity.
To really wrap our heads around genetics, we absolutely have to start at the foundational raw materials. We're talking about the base chemical that serves as the blueprint for literally every living organism. And that chemical is DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. This is it, the primary blueprint of life carrying all the developmental instructions. Now, a quick but super important note for those of you gearing up for exams. Pay really close attention to how that is spelled. It is deoxyribonucleic acid. A surprisingly common, kind of painful mistake is writing denitroribonucleic, or just completely mixing up the prefixes. Nail the spelling, and you lock in that foundational definition. Okay, let's dive into this macro to micro hierarchy. Honestly, it really helps to think of these terms not just as random vocabulary words you have to memorize, but kind of like a nested Russian doll of biological information. Step 1 is the raw chemical itself, DNA. Step 2 is a functional segment of that chemical, and we call that a gene. And then step 3 is the fully packaged, finished structure, the chromosome. If you can keep that sequence clear in your mind, chemical, segment, package structure, the rest of genetics is going to feel incredibly logical.
Section 2. The genomic spool. Solving the packaging problem.
And this brings us right back to that crucial question I asked at the very beginning. How in the world does all this massive instructional data physically fit inside a tiny cell nucleus? Well, the answer lies in a genuinely brilliant evolutionary solution: histones. Histones are specialized packaging proteins. They provide the physical framework necessary to protect, organize, and tightly compact our genetic material. Without these proteins acting as structural support, those long strands of DNA would be way too unruly to ever fit efficiently inside a cell. They really are the structural heroes of heredity.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how that packaging process works, using a really simple everyday analogy. Just think of the DNA as a long, thin piece of thread, right? And think of the histones, those packaging proteins, as a wooden spool. When you take that thread and wrap it tightly around the spool, you get the biological reality, the chemical blueprint wrapping around packaging proteins to form a compact unit of heredity. Which brings us to the formal definition of a chromosome. It's a large, organized structure consisting of a long strand of DNA tightly wrapped around histone proteins. Notice the heavy emphasis there. A chromosome is strictly DNA plus protein. You'd be amazed how many students forget the protein part when defining this on a test. Seriously, never forget the histones. Oh, and just a fun fact to put things into perspective, in humans, we have 46 of these fully wound spools hanging out in our body cells.
Section 3. Genes and physical traits, bridging the invisible to the visible.
So, okay, we've got our massive thread wrapped around our protein spools. But how do these microscopic chemical loops actually create the real-world physical traits we see in the mirror every single day? Let's zoom in a bit. Within that long thread of DNA, there are specific functional segments, and these are called genes. A gene isn't the entire strand, not at all. It's simply a specific slice or portion of the DNA that carries a distinct chemical code.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the precise biological pipeline. Like, how do we actually get from a line of microscopic code to a physical characteristic? First, the gene carries specific chemical instructions. Second, those instructions are actively read and used to produce a very specific protein. And third, it's that resulting protein that actually does the heavy lifting to determine a physical trait, which we also call your phenotype. Whether we're talking about the pigment creating your eye color or the proteins that regulate your skin temperature, it literally always follows this exact pipeline: gene to protein to trait.
Section 4.
Alleles, different genetic flavors, the source of trait variation.
Here's a thought. If every single human has the exact same basic genes for specific categories, we all have genes for eye color, hair type, blood type, why do we all look so incredibly different from one another? Well, that variation comes down to alleles. An allele is simply a different version or an alternate form of the exact same gene. This happens because the exact DNA sequence within that gene can vary just a little bit from person to person. And here is a massive exam tip for you. Whenever you're reading a question and you see the phrase alternate form of a gene, your brain should instantly, automatically jump to the word allele.
Now we need to draw a really strict, clear boundary between these two terms, because using them interchangeably is probably the #1 mistake students make. Think of the gene as the broad category. For example, earlobe shape or blood type. The allele, on the other hand, is the specific version or the flavor that you inherit. So for earlobes, the alleles would be free-hanging versus attached. For blood type, the alleles would be type A or type O. Just remember, gene equals category, allele equals specific version. Simple as that.
Section 5. Master the exam question. Put your knowledge to the test. All right, let's consolidate everything we've just learned and tackle a real-world scenario. This aligns perfectly with the kind of stuff you'll see in an exam, like CCSE Biology Objective 1.1. The question is, which option correctly refers to DNA, a chromosome, a gene, and an allele? We're actually going ahead and showing you the correct option right off the bat, option A. It lists DNA as deoxyribonucleic acid, chromosome as DNA plus histone, gene as coding for a protein, and allele as an alternate form. Let's break down exactly why this is the absolutely perfect answer.
Let's move to and see how this builds logically, step by step. Step 1, you analyze the keyword for DNA. You immediately know it's the raw chemical, deoxyribonucleic acid. Step 2, you recall our spool and thread analogy. You know a chromosome isn't just DNA, it's DNA plus those histone proteins. Step 3, you identify the actual function of a gene. What does that segment do? It codes for a specific protein. And step 4, you lock onto that golden keyword. The phrase alternate form always links straight to allele. When you actively analyze the keywords like this, you completely bypass the trick answers and nail it every time.
So the crucial point is really just making sure you don't fall into the common traps. We've laid out a visual checklist here. First, do not use gene and allele interchangeably. Remember the rule. If a question explicitly mentions protein, think gene. If it says alternate, think allele. And whatever you do, please don't forget the protein part when you're talking about a chromosome. Just close your eyes and visualize that thread winding around the wooden spool. DNA plus histones. You've got this.
It truly is mind-blowing when you step back and look at the big picture. From a relatively simple chemical thread and a microscopic protein spool, nature manages to orchestrate the infinite variations of life on Earth. I mean, you are literally a walking, breathing marvel of biological packaging. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a little provocative thought to chew on today. As those invisible histone spools continuously unwind in your cells right now, what unique, incredible physical traits is your chemical thread coding for at this very moment? Keep learning, keep questioning, and we will see you in the next explainer.
As always, the link for this study tool is in the description below. Let me know what you think in the comments.